Right at about 1 o'clock, so I'm going to get started. Hang on one second. I need to adjust my settings here. All right, welcome and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our webinar, Opportunity to Experiment, Accessing SARE Farmer Rancher Grants. We are also very lucky to have a couple of folks from USDA SARE joining us. Joan Benjamin and Beth Nelson are here, although Beth said she can only stay briefly. But they will be helpful in answering some of your questions later, I do imagine. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you today about this really amazing opportunity for Illinois farmers to test out their personal farming experience and see what works in practice for their operations. I'm also very grateful to be joined by our past grant awardees panel, Maggie Watcher, Ann Swanson, Mark O'Rourke, and Stu Jacobson. Thank you all so much for agreeing to participate. I'm sure your insight will be invaluable to folks that are hoping to try to win one of these grants. Before we get started completely in earnest, I do want to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded. It will be made available afterward on our website, thelandconnection.org, and as well as our YouTube channel. And in case anyone is not familiar with the rules of Zoom yet, you should have all been muted when you came into this Zoom room. And I just ask that you remain muted during our presentation. But once we get to the grants panel, since we have a small group, we can probably do an open discussion around that. However, if you do have questions during this, during the presentation at any point, you are welcome to type your question into the chat box, and we will monitor those and try to answer them as we go. So to give you a sense of where we are going, I have welcomed you, so we are already on to number 2. We are off and running. I'm gonna, in a moment, give you a brief overview of the SARE Farmer Rancher Grant opportunity. And then I'm going to provide some tips for preparing your proposal. And then we will really spend the bulk of our time speaking with the past awardees. What we are not going to go in depth on this presentation will be the application process or using the grants portal. Joan Benjamin has already put together a really excellent webinar that guides you through using that entire portal. And I would suggest reviewing that to understand how that entire process works. I will share the link to that webinar at the end, along with a bunch of resources for you to take advantage of. All right, so the first major thing anyone who's hoping to apply for one of these projects needs to note is that the deadline is December 3rd at 4 p.m. Central Time. And so that essentially means you have 1 month from today to develop and submit your application. So I will note that pulling together a government grant application can be time consuming. So if you haven't started yet, I suggest starting today and start to outline what it is you're going to be doing so you can start to get all those pieces pulled together. The funding is available in 3 tiers that are based on collaboration. So you can, if you are an individual farm operation, you can apply for up to $9,000. If you want to collaborate with another farmer who is operating a separate and distinct farm operation, you can apply for up to $18,000. And they also offer group grants that you can apply for up to $27,000. And that requires 3 or more distinct and separate farm operations. And all of these projects have 23 months to be completed, so just under 2 years. SARE, I should have mentioned at the very beginning, SARE stands for Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education. And so these projects are really focused on research and education. SARE wants to see farmers applying for innovative, sustainable agriculture research or education projects. These are not for your everyday farming expenses, unless those expenses are directly related to the project that you will be completing. So don't think that you can just say you need a new tractor implement and apply and get money and get the implement and be done with it. It does not work that way. Purchase of equipment or supplies for fabrication may be allowable in your proposal, though SARE does have limits as to how much they will pay for those things, as well as you also will need to justify how that expense would be necessary for your project. These projects need to address SARE's 3 principles of sustainable agriculture, which are stewardship, profit, and quality of life. And the other way they say that is that the project should be ecologically sound, economically viable, and socially responsible. So in all likelihood, your project may really focus on one of these principles, but you need to address how your project speaks to all 3 of these. There is a full page in the application that you have to write a section for each one of those: stewardship, profit, and quality of life, and how your project addresses those. So take some time to think carefully about how you are approaching those. First, so now I'm going to give you some general tips for getting your proposal started. Very important to read and reread the RFP. RFP stands for Request for Proposals, and you can find the RFP on the North Central Regional SARE website. Again, I will share that once we get to the end of this presentation. The RFP, I will say, is a bit long, but half of it is the application and the other half is instructions and guidance for completing the application. So especially, you do want to read that all very carefully and make sure you understand it entirely. If you run into, actually, apologize. There are also a lot of resources included in that RFP about halfway through, so you should definitely take advantage of those. Then, like I said, you really need to determine a clear project goal for your proposal. So you need to think about what it is that you are hoping to accomplish by completing this project. What are the outcomes you hope to see on the ground? Your project goal should be the broad understanding that you seek to gain from completing this project. You will also need to review past projects. So on the right side of your screen here, you can see this image of the SARE project search database. You will be required in your proposal to explain how your project builds on past research. So it is really important to take some time in this portal to see what has already been done and develop how your project can help support that previous research. It's going to also be really helpful for refining your project ideas and figuring out how you might expand on your initial goal that you might have come up with. So if you want to use this portal here, I suggest that you just go to this project reports search bar, come up with some keywords relevant to your project goal, type them in there, and it will return a lot of information. So if you were if your proposal was about testing out a new mix of cover crops, you could just go to the project reports bar here, type in cover crops, and it will return a lot of results, especially for a topic like cover crops. You're going to get a lot of results back, so you probably want to add some additional keywords to refine that. But then you can go through and see all the research that has been funded by SARE around that topic and see how your project fits in and builds on that research. Like I said, SARE is really really does care quite a bit about how research builds over time. So you do need to do your due diligence on the research that has already been completed. You should also search for non-SARE funded research. So you can reach out to local ag groups, to NRCS, to ATRA, extension educators, local ag organizations like the Land Connection, to see, to bounce your ideas off of them, to see if these folks have knowledge of other research done in this same theme area. And also these folks might be useful collaborators on your project and may be able to help complete the work. So if you want to invite collaboration, I suggest reaching out to some of these folks. Oh, and Joan Benjamin also mentioned that you can use the search tips to narrow your search results in that portal, so that is very helpful. Also, while you're thinking about reaching out to folks about sharing ideas or finding extra research, I would suggest enlisting a proofreader for your proposal. Think of somebody who would not be directly involved in your project that can review your proposal and give you feedback. I suggest that they're not involved with your project, because somebody who is not in the headspace that you are in while you're writing your proposal can probably be, will more likely be able to pull out points that seem confusing or that need clarification for someone who's not involved in the project to understand what's going on. This is also really helpful for just catching the sorts of things that you might regularly miss, especially if you're going to spend many hours working on this. You read and you reread, and sometimes things just start to blur. So having another set of eyes can really help to pull out things that you may not be paying attention to. You also are required to submit at least one letter of support for this proposal. I believe you can submit up to 2, but no more. So it's also good to identify who that person will be early and to give them enough time to thoughtfully write you that letter of support. So the person who writes your letter of support can be somebody directly involved with your project. So say if you regularly work with an extension agent, they may be a good candidate to help you with the outreach component of your project. And if you have them write your letter of support, you should have them mention how they are going to actually be working with you on the work of the project. Other people that would be good candidates to fill the role for writing your letter of support are potentially your FSA agent, your banker, one of your wholesale customers. It is really very wide open. It just cannot be someone in your family. So don't give your mother a call and ask her to write you a letter of support. It needs to be somebody from the community that can speak to how your project is important for advancing sustainable agriculture. The next one, I believe, is kind of the most valuable thing we do here at the Land Connection when working on a grant proposal, is outlining all of the pieces before you really start writing. It's really helpful to go through that complete application and start to think about all the components that need to be put together and start to put down some bullets in each of those pieces as to how you're going to start to address the prompts in that application. And one thing that SARE does that's very helpful is they allow you to download the RFP in Word format. So you can directly be writing into the application section of that Word document. You can start to outline in there, put in your bullets. It's a great place where you can use spell check and word counts to make sure that everything is looking right before you go into the online portal and start moving all of that information in there. I do believe that also having it all in one spot where you can easily scroll through can be really helpful for recognizing things that maybe are in the wrong spot or maybe need to be adjusted slightly. Again, completing a grant proposal is not a quick process. So do not expect that you can open up the RFP on the morning of December 3rd and be ready to submit that application by 4 p.m. It is very, very unlikely that you can do that. You may be a superstar, so you can prove me wrong, but I would suggest that you start early and give yourself some deadlines to create some accountability to get you to the finish line. So set yourself a deadline for when you want to complete that outline, when you want to have your first draft of writing done, when you expect to hand the proposal off to your proofreader, when you expect to get it back, when you want to submit your proposal. Same for when you engage your person to write your letter of support, give them a deadline, let them know how the process is going, keep them engaged all the way through so that you have some accountability on yourself to get this done in the time that you have available. All right. So again, it's like I said, you need to start with a clear goal in mind, but the goal isn't the only part of the puzzle. You really need to have a very clear understanding of how you can actually complete this work within the 23 months that you will have available to do so. You're going to have to lay out a complete timeline in the proposal of all the tasks you're going to complete, when you will complete them, and the people who are going to be involved with those tasks. Be as realistic as you possibly can about what you are going to accomplish. Recognize that more is just more. It doesn't help to try to cram more work into your proposal because you think it will be more competitive. That is what we do in the nonprofit world, and I will tell you, it sometimes hurts because once you win that award, you have to do all the work you said you were going to do. So make sure you are very realistic about what you can complete in the amount of time you have available. Think broadly about the regular tasks that you need to complete in your year of farming and how this project can fit in and complement the work that you're already getting done. Again, if you're engaging cooperators, if you're going to submit a like a team of 2 or a group grant, then you want to talk to those folks and get them on board as early as possible and clearly define your roles and expectations for everybody involved. Outreach is also a very important part of these grants. Like I mentioned, SARE cares quite a bit about building on research, and it's important to be able to build on research. We need to know what was learned from that research. So you will have to complete a second timeline explaining your outreach activities. Again, you're going to lay out the time when the activities are completed, what the activities are, and who's going to be involved. So some folks may choose to host a field day to show off how their experiment was completed. You might try to create a resource booklet. Again, this is all work that takes time, so be very realistic about what time you will have available to do that, and also what time of year you will do that and how that fits into your regular farming schedule. Okay, this is about it before we move on to the panel. So these I'm just going to give you some pretty basic grant writing tips. Again, read the RFP as many times as you can, like ingrain it in your brain. The instructions are very important. If you do not understand something in the RFP or in the application, you can reach out to SARE in Illinois. We have 2 Illinois State SARE coordinators, Doug Gucker and Bruce Branham. And Joan Benjamin, who is on this webinar, is our North Central Regional SARE coordinator for this grant project, and she knows the application, and so she can help to clarify anything that you might find confusing. And I will share the contact information for each of those individuals in just a moment. One thing that you should note is the easiest way to get thrown out of a grant pool is by not following instructions. So it would be such a shame to spend hours and hours working on something, and just because you didn't follow the instructions, your proposal just gets tossed in the garbage right away. So please follow the instructions. I would also suggest that when you enlist your proofreader, you ask them to carefully read through your proposal with the instructions in mind, so they can also flag anything that they think you might have mistakenly, incorrectly followed an instruction. Each of the prompts has a word count limit, so pay attention to those. You will, pardon me. Like I said, if you download the RFP in Word, that's a good spot to be organizing your proposal and checking that your word counts will fit once you move it over to the online portal. These don't need to be super flowery. You should write very clearly and concisely. They limit the amount of words for you to use so that you can also try to refine your own thinking and create an explanation of your project that can be well understood by multiple people. You're also going to need to avoid using jargon or acronyms. If you're going to use any term that you feel is maybe very understandable to somebody in your field of agriculture, but may not be as easily understood by folks in other parts of agriculture, you will need to explain exactly what it is that you are saying. Do not assume that all the reviewers know everything there is to know about all kinds of farming. So be very clear. Again, be specific and detailed while also being brief. Pardon me. Make sure that you're answering all the prompts completely. Many of the prompts in it have multiple parts to them. So again, if you are looking at your RFP, you should try to flag each component of every prompt so that you can make sure that you address all of the components in that prompt. And again, I would say when you hand it off to your proofreader, ask them to also double check that you are addressing everything included in the prompt. Be realistic with your budget and clearly justify your reasoning. You have to complete a budget and also write a budget narrative that justifies all of the components you're including in your budget. So you want to explain how you came to the numbers that you're using. So if you were going to do a project testing like garlic varieties on your farm and you want to buy 50 pounds of garlic seed, you need to explain, what is the cost per pound, that's how you get to the total cost and who you're purchasing it from, and that is the unit price that they are quoting you. So make sure that it is clear and reasonable what you are proposing within your budget. And finally, this is the reason these grants exist. Be clear about how this project can help to advance sustainable agriculture and education. Like I said, SARE cares quite a bit about advancing sustainable agriculture through research and education. And these projects build year over year. So be very clear about how you are contributing to the greater ecosystem of sustainable agriculture and how you are improving your own operation at the same time. Now I'm going to give you the list of resources. I will pop those all into the chat box in a moment. These are just the website to get to the Farmer Rancher grants, the NCR-SARE grants webinar that Joan did, the RFP, as well as some contacts for you. I will say the Michael Fields Institute, Martin Belke there, he can provide some grant writing support. I am also available to provide some grant writing support, though very limited. I can probably give a thorough review of 2 to 3 proposals before December 3rd. But if you reach out to me early, I may be able to help you. All right, so with that, I'm going to stop sharing and see what questions we have here. Okay, I see that Iris has asked if this grant is only for Illinois. And yes, the North Central region covers 12 states. And I see Jacqueline has answered that as well. So this is now we're going to get into the exciting part. So I'm going to welcome our grants panel, although it looks like maybe Mark. Nope, there's Mark. All right, I'm going to unmute you, Stuart, Maggie, and and you seem to have some more control over your own mute button than I'm allowed to unmute you on my own. All right, you're there. And Mark is here too. So Mark, if you would like to share your video, that would be great. But if you are not comfortable with that, that is also totally fine. Oh, there he is.
Yep.
All right. So I'd like to get started with our panel questions. And again, if anybody on the call has extra questions, feel free to just pop those into the chat box as they come to you and we can address those as we go. So I'd just like to start with introductions from the panel. So if you could each tell me just who you are, your enterprise, and briefly what the SARE project that you completed was, would be fantastic. And Stu, can I start with you?
Sure. Let's see. I go by Stu, and I'm a beekeeper and actually produce queen bees and don't mess with honey. And our project, actually, we got several. Our project, with Joan's help, by the way, we got, it was a focus on an organization that was doing more education than research on disease-resistant bees, actually. Did I cover the basics?
Yes, I think you did. Thank you. I know it's been, you probably have, it's been a while since you received the grant. I think our other panelists have maybe been more recent also. Yeah. I'll pass it off to Maggie, who is also involved in beekeeping.
Right. So my name is Maggie Wachter, and I'm a master beekeeper, and I live in Urbana, Illinois, and I have bees on farms throughout Champaign County. And I have received 2 grants from SARE in Farmer Rancher, both of them. In 2017, I received the first one to investigate the origins of honey by looking at the pollen. And then the second grant I received in 2019, I'm still working on it, to investigate honey, to isolate brewer's yeast for brewing. So those are the 2 grants I was lucky enough to receive.
Excellent, thank you. Mark? Oops.
There we go. I muted myself and I needed to unmute. My name is Mark O'Rourke. I am a vegetable producer, both farmers market and small wholesale operation. 2 of our biggest products are snap beans and sweet corn. I'm doing a little work with my brothers in a grain operation right now. So if you see a combine come up behind me or truck, that's what's going on. So my project was, as about 4 years ago, we purchased a green bean harvesting machine. And one of the things that the manufacturer noted was that they have very good luck growing snap beans following a cover crop to help keep the weeds down. So in my area, my question was for my project was to determine what cover crop mixes worked best in a sweet corn and snap bean rotation. So that's, and I believe that was also 2017 that was through, but I'm sorry, I've lost track of time. It's hard for me to keep track, so.
That's entirely understandable, especially right now. And Anne, would you like to share? I believe Anne is the first of our members that completed an education proposal too.
Yeah, my name's Ann Swanson. I am a farmer and a chef, and I received a SARE grant in 2016 for increasing fresh food in institutional kitchens. And I sit on the Farmer Rancher Grant Review Committee, and I am also a participant in the SARE Advisory Board.
Excellent. So Anne probably also has a bit more insight to share about the process and how it works on the back end. So I'd be interested to hear from each of you how you found the application process, how you found putting together your proposal, anything that stood out to you as being especially difficult or time consuming that folks need to be aware of. And we can go round robin again. I'll start with Stu.
Well, the first thing I want to say is after listening to your presentation, that sounds a hell of a lot harder than it was when I wrote several. But a number of the things you pointed out were things I actually had written down. But and one of them is simply to reiterate: don't promise too much. I tend to be optimistic about getting things done, getting various things done, and get carried away. And related to that, again, this is similar to what you said, Cassidy, is I would get two people, not just one, but two people to review your project. I would hunt for someone who you know is a bit critical. I mean, reasonable and not negative, but critical, to help you find things that don't quite make sense. The other person, depending on their background, may not see them, and you may not see them. Follow instructions to a T. So I'm sounding like I'm just reiterating here. Write clearly and simply, and again, in the case of bees, for instance, very few farmers are going to know much about bees, other than they may know more now than they did 10 years ago. But it's important, if you use a term, to say what it means, or if you can find an alternative to using a specific term, to whether it's bees or viticulture or whatever, you get around the jargon issue, or you minimize the jargon issue. Yeah, make sure your project supports SARE's goals. I'll leave it there. And I think that's almost everything you mentioned before.
Well, I'm glad to know I was on the right track. Maggie?
Yeah. I'll just walk you through a little bit of what the process was for me. The hardest part was honing in on the project, especially in the second grant. I went through so many ideas and looking them up in the database. One of my ideas, someone had done it already that I didn't know, and there it was in the database. But and bouncing them off other beekeepers, and then finally coming up with something I really wanted to do. I think passion is important, because the grant writing process especially is grueling, or was for me. I went through so many, once I found my project and I checked it out in the database and found some related SARE projects, but no one had done what I wanted to do. In the second case, it was isolating yeast in honey for another purpose, like baking bread or brewing beer. So once I found my project and I knew I really wanted to do this, I started talking to other people who might like to accompany me on the journey, like microbrewers, beekeepers, anyone who was interested in going beyond the traditional uses of honey into some sort of cross-pollination with another field. In this case, it was with brewing. And I also checked it out with Joan Benjamin. And I would say Joan Benjamin is a wonderful resource to have, because she, not only is she extremely smart, but she's encouraging and interested, and she gets things very quickly. And there were times along the way where she was able to answer my question. Like, for example, in my first grant, and both, I knew it by the time I was in the second grant, but in the first grant, the instructions ask you to have an academic contact. And I just couldn't find someone who really, academics are so involved in their own research, it was hard to find someone who really cared about the project the way I wanted them to. And when I talked that over with Joan, she explained to me, well, the academic contact was mostly for budget management, because there are tax implications if you're an individual managing a grant budget. But it wasn't absolutely necessary. So it was very, very good to have Joan available to help me straighten out little glitches or questions that weren't answered in the online resources. And then after that, I started to identify other people, farmers, beekeepers in my case, who would like to investigate the same project. And then I started writing. And I agree with you, Cassidy, starting today is a good idea, because it's to thoughtfully fill out that application takes a lot of time and many, many iterations. Reading, rereading, giving it to other people, talking it over with others in your field, getting it just right takes a lot of time. And there are some resources for reading that SARE offers for reading over your budget. And Cassidy just offered himself. Boy, that's not something you do lightly, because those proposals are dense. But getting someone who is knowledgeable in the way of grants, especially SARE grants, is really useful. But last year I sent it in to, tell me again, the institute that offers.
The Michael Fields Institute?
Yeah. I sent my project in, and the comment that the man who who reread my proposal to me was he was glad I was sending it in so early. He said people think that they can send it in a week before the deadline and make use of his insights. So I started early, submitting my proposal and getting as much feedback as I could. And it was useful, valuable feedback. And so I finished the proposal, I finished the budget. I sent it in, and then you just wait. And I think the whole experience for me was very grounding in. But by the time I finished that proposal, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So it was a very good experience personally, just clarifying things. One tip that I got from sending my proposal into the SARE resources was that SARE wants, quote, a bang for their buck. And that means that when you're talking about outreach, think about as much as you can do with the results of your grant. And I have this as a booklet that is the result of the first grant, and it's available on PDF from the SARE website. But booklets are probably old technology, but they are remarkably useful old technology. People really want them and use them, and we printed up a bunch of them, and over time we've given a lot of them away. We didn't feel like we could sell them. You might want to clarify this. I think you can sell some grant projects, but we didn't want to do it because our budget included the costs of writing and printing. So we gave them away, but it got so we had to really be careful who we gave them to. In Curtis Orchard, which was one of our partners, they put it on display with a little sign that says available upon request. Mm. So so we've been distributing that over the last 2 years. It was a very useful PR type of thing. So think about all the different ways that you can use the research and show SARE that they're going to get a lot out of it, that many, many other farmers will be able to benefit from the type of research you're doing. And I just want to say that when I started writing this grant way back in 2016, I think, someone who in a local nonprofit organization told me that the only way to get a grant is to know the people. Well, I found out that that is not true for SARE. SARE is really interested in your ideas. But along the way, I did get to know the people, and I must say that everyone who works for SARE, I think, is there because they want to help. So I wasn't sure. It took me a long time to call Joan Benjamin about any questions I might have, but especially that one when I couldn't find an academic contact. But she was so welcoming and down to earth, and and encouraging that it really gave me the confidence to know I was on the right track and I was doing it according to the way that SARE wants you to do it. So I must say I've just found everyone in the SARE process, including the local, the regional context, Doug and Brian, they are so helpful in so many ways. So reach out to people and test your idea on them, and then hide yourself somewhere where no one can bother you for about a month. My beekeeping really suffered during the writing process, but it's because it's so intense. But when I emerged again, I really felt confident about my project. And I even said to one of them, when I was meeting the regional people, I said to one of them, I just don't see how this can't work. And he said to me, whoa, you know, take it easy. Not every grant gets accepted. And, you know, he wanted me to calm down a little on my project. But people have been just really good for pre-evaluation, getting ready to submit your grant, to help you submit the best possible project you can, and then you just have to sit back and wait till I think it was February when they notified me that I was accepted. So
yeah, excellent. I would reiterate what Maggie said. The folks at SARE are fantastic. They're great and they are helpful. So if you have questions, definitely reach out to Joan or Doug or Bruce. They can definitely help out. And like I did offer my own personal support. Like I said, I can probably review about 2 to 3 full proposals because it is quite time consuming. And if you want to share that with me sooner rather than later, it's always a good idea. And I would point to one thing that Maggie said about her outreach component with the booklets. Don't hesitate to reach out to other local agricultural nonprofits. We love to share resources and we contact a lot of farmers on the regular basis. So if you have resources that we can help to distribute or get out to the community, we can definitely be partners in that. We may not be able to take on the cost of printing, but in terms of sharing electronic media, we're more than equipped for that. So keep us in mind. Mark, would you like to tell us a bit about the application process for yourself?
Well, the application process, it is very straightforward. And what I would recommend is, for me, I had been thinking about the project for at least a year before I started to sit down and write it. It came fairly easy to me writing the proposal. I'd worked for big ag industry doing protocols and research, so that part was pretty easy. And, you know, smart objectives, you know, keeping things specific, measurable, have the time component, and the R and the A, I can't remember what that relates to, but just try and keep it as realistic as possible. Don't try and do too much. The process, if you really haven't been thinking about something and you're on this presentation right now, wanting to do a SARE project, I mean, if it were me doing it, I'd wait until next year because I have to think things through because there's so much that goes into it. You know, who's doing what? What's the timing of your project? What are you doing to earn your living while you're doing this other project? Because we all need to do that. The $9,000 now is a great help spread over 2 years, but I mean, when you're doing something new, but still you've got to be able to put food on your table. So let's see, I had some other thoughts I was thinking of as the others were talking. Everybody's got some great comments, both about staff and just about the whole process. Think about through your research proposal what other things are going on and what can go wrong. I started my project and then we came into a drought the first year. I mean, it was so dry, I couldn't get things planted. Ground was too hard to plant. So you think through that. What would you do in a number of different situations? What would you do if it was too wet through that same period? So there's lots of different things that you could do to prepare yourself when you're writing that proposal, and maybe even incorporate that into the proposal. The proposals do have, or the projects do have, an option to extend for a year or so, or whatever's practical for your project. But I would really recommend trying to, have a really good, well-written document that you will accomplish that in the 2-year period.
Yeah, good point. I do think, I assume that most of us at this point in 2020 are getting pretty well versed at contingency planning, but it's always to think about, what can go wrong and how you're going to be able to, I don't want to say pivot, but, adapt to the situations that you're confronted by. Thank you. Anne, would you like to share a bit about the application process? I don't know if you could also speak to, if you are even allowed to speak to what it's like to be as a reviewer on the application side of things.
Yeah, I think so. I made a couple notes, and Joan, if I say something I'm not supposed to, just interrupt me or mute me. I think the hardest part for when I first applied for the Farmer Rancher grant was just the daunting task of writing a grant. I'm not a grant writer. I have no experience writing, and so just kind of being able to use local resources to help, break it down and make it into accomplishable tasks was very helpful with me. Having someone help edit. Another problem I had was I was so passionate about my project that I was too wordy, and I was constantly going over the word count. And so, and I didn't start writing my grant until now, a month out before the deadline. And I have to say that if you guys are going to apply, then now is the time to start, because the editing process and getting everything, down to scale took the longest for me. It was about a 2-week process. So just bear in mind that. Cassidy, you covered almost everything that I was going to talk about, and that was a really great slideshow. The things that I want to emphasize is do your research on the past projects that SARE has on their website. SARE isn't going to fund a duplicated proposal. And the people who sit on the grant review committee are fairly familiar and do research on what has been done. So they're able to point out and identify if a project has been done before. So just make sure you research what's out there. And also, when I was writing my grant, SARE really encouraged me to, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but just build off the projects that they have currently. And so I can't stress enough to use that resource that Joan posted the link for. It's unbelievably informational and helpful. Remember that SARE stands for Sustainable Ag Research and Education. So make sure that when you write your proposal that you're touching on all of those things. A lot of grant reviewers really look for what is the sustainable ag component, what is the research, and how are you educating the community about your project. So, keep in mind what SARE is. And then another thing that grant reviewers really look for that I've experienced is how is your project going to affect SARE and help the community? So think about the community, and if your project is a project that other farmers can easily replicate, that it would help their business opportunity as well. Grant reviewers really look at how easily replicated your project can be. As far as outreach goes, when you guys are in your outreach session or outreach section of your proposal, make sure that you try to put as much outreach as possible, because the whole point is to spread the word about what you're doing so that other farmers can use what your project is and maybe use it to help them on their farms. And never forget about social media. A lot of the times people in the outreach section are so focused on conferences and conventions that they forget the obvious. And so grant reviewers really look at social media and what kind of effect that has. Cassidy touched on this. Make sure you do everything the request for proposal asks. So go section by section, because if you don't do what they ask, grant reviewers are going to automatically mark you down for that. And those are just easy marks that you can check off your list and know that you've successfully done. So just make sure you read the proposal, you reread it, and you're constantly rereading it. And then through the editing process, read it again and make sure you're checking off everything that you have. Reach out to SARE and ask questions and use your local connections. The land connection was hugely helpful to me when I was writing my grant in 2016. I actually got to use the land connection to help with the outreach portion of my grant. And Cassie Carroll, a former employee of the Land Connection, also helped me edit my grant, and she reviewed it a couple times before it actually got submitted. So just make sure there are a lot of local resources available to help you review your proposal. And, SARE also likes collaboration. So make sure you're also using the local resources to disseminate your information once your proposal is finished. So do not be afraid to ask questions. Joan is the most lovely person I've ever met. She is here to help. And honestly, it was so surprising. She really wants these proposals to succeed. And so she will do everything in her power to help you and give you advice and kind of be a leader in that aspect. I love SARE so much that I tried to join every facet of SARE once I received my grant. So I just can't speak enough to how wonderful the people are. And so please make sure you use them and don't be scared to reach out with questions. And then if your proposal doesn't get accepted, SARE is really wonderful about giving feedback. Even if it does get accepted, you can still request feedback from your proposal, which you can build off future proposals on. But if your proposal doesn't get accepted, ask for feedback. You can make changes and you can resubmit it the following year with changes you've made. So just be aware of that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. That is a really good point. I mean, again, I feel like, Joan, we should give you like a plaque at the end of this. SARE is incredibly helpful, and they really do want people to be successful, and so they are there as a support system to help out. So definitely use that. And truly, the SARE website is full of resources. But if you get lost and you don't know where to turn to, I do think Joan is going to be an excellent resource. Okay, I want to move on to actually executing the grant project. So I'd be interested to know from each of you what impact did receiving the grant have on your work, and has it improved your operation in any way? And was the learning experience worth the effort? You all sound like you're it very much was. So I don't know if that's worth asking, but Stu, would you like to explain what the impact of receiving the grant and executing the work was like for you?
Well, again, I was working through an organization, which actually I helped found, which was the Illinois Queen Initiative. So focused on producing queens of, let's say, superior genetics. And so in working on the project, and there were a couple of iterations of that, I became much more convinced about the value of that. And we did a lot of outreach, primarily to get other beekeepers interested in producing their own queens. So competing with, we're educating potential competitors. And yeah, I guess that's the main thing. But I want to jump in with one thing in case we have to close off fairly quickly. That one thing that I don't think anybody meant. I think it's really important to know your collaborators well. Know if, for instance, if you have a collaborator who is spread out and maybe depending on what kind of farming they're doing, you need their involvement at the same time that they're planting or spraying or whatever. That's something to think about and really ask them. And also there's an issue of, for want of a better term, chemistry. And I really think, I mean, I'm speaking from experience on a SARE grant, but it was an educational grant where there were some issues. And so anyway, I think it's really worthwhile. It's great to collaborate. I believe in it a great deal. Sometimes it can make a difference in terms of your proposals, a lot more attractive, but it's something you really need to think about. And again, get to know the person. Ideally, you know them already pretty well.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point. Collaboration is a good sell, but yeah, you want to be collaborating with folks that you know that you can work with and that will deliver on their expectations. And so when you're putting together your proposal and thinking about what you can accomplish, also engage them in that process to understand like what are their other commitments and are they able to actually collaborate at the times that you need them to be committing. I think another thing that Stu mentioned that is interesting is thinking about competition. And, you know, we may think of these other folks doing the same things as our competitors, but engaging them in this research project can be really helpful for everybody improving their outcomes. And it can be really helpful for advancing the entire system. So I do think it's better to think of them as collaborators rather than competitors. Maggie, would you like to talk a little about the impact of executing the grant?
Yes. One of the biggest surprises was especially with my first grant, was the closeness and the cooperation that developed between me and Curtis Orchard was my partner. And to this day, 3-4 years later, I still have bees on their land. And they have bees too, and we work together. And in fact, today we're helping them move their hives. It couldn't have resulted in a better relationship. And beekeeping is kind of hard because you do a lot of it on your own. But we do a lot of it together. And that's just, it's all started with a SARE grant. I didn't even know them before the SARE grant. So I'm really appreciative of that. The other thing is, and in this grant too, it's given me a closer relationship with especially with the brewers. And on the microbiology side, I'm learning a lot. So I'm really glad to have that. And I think it's probably going to improve the quality of what I brew, maybe for the rest of my life. But it also has given me, the whole experience has given me a lot more confidence in the areas of my grant, like looking for pollen and honey and varietal honey and pollination techniques. I know a lot more than I did when I started, and it helps me advise farmers and help my own beekeeping operation, I'm more knowledgeable than I was when I began.
Thank you. Yeah, those are great points. I mean, this is really a relationship building opportunity, an opportunity to potentially build, expand your customer base and work with new, different operations that are maybe outside of your normal comfort zone. And also, I do think the point that you made about it increasing your confidence is really key. I do think when you get to invest the time in learning about the work that you do more intentionally, it can really advance the work you're able to accomplish in the future. Mark, would you like to tell us a little bit about your execution of the grant?
Sure. I think through executing my research,
No, no, you just froze right
have
there.
some firsthand experience. Can you hear me?
Oh, you're back, yeah.
Okay. My research looking at multiple types of cover crops really helped me understand each of the species a little better. And right now I've incorporated cover crops into more of our operation, significantly into our sweet potato and cucurbit type production, as well as you know, the green beans, snap beans, and sweet corn and general production. So just having that before this project, we just used a couple cover crops, a little bit of cereal rye and a little bit of the tillage radish. But being able to take a look at something like Kerry Vetch, which I always heard about it, heard it had some very good attributes, but having worked with it firsthand, it's a really cool cover crop. I like it a lot more, and am learning how to manage it more. So that's through this project. Is really appreciate SARE giving me the opportunity to take a look at my project. So
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's another great point. Like this research and learning that you do can expand into other parts of your operation. It's something that you can continue to build off of. Anne, would you like to tell us a little bit about your completing your grant?
Receiving the SARE grant and completing it was life-changing. It was so amazing. Receiving the grant raised awareness in my company about the actual need for fresh food. And so as a result, we expanded our farm from a small 3-acre plot to 10 acres, and which allowed us to produce more fresh food that goes back into the company. And, you know, we've put a huge dent into wholesale produce purchasing that usually gets shipped from a large food service company. The grant also allowed us to expand on our educational activities that we were doing within the company. So we were educating chefs on local food, and that has since expanded. And our community outreach has also expanded from this. So it's been a really amazing experience, and it all just kind of grew from the start of this 2016 grant. It's a wonderful networking after you receive your grant. SARE, you know, asks you to participate in conferences by, you know, showing your grant, and it's just all, you know, it's just an amazing networking opportunity. And then it's also allowed me to participate in other food social justice projects around town as a consultant, because I was able to provide this experience and use my past experience to help other areas in the community do a little bit of food reform.
Excellent. Thanks. Yeah, I feel like everyone has great things to say about this is a really potentially very positive impact to be able to receive one of these grants and have the opportunity to complete that. I do want to say to folks listening in, if you do have any questions for the panel, please do go ahead and type those in. I'm about to wrap up my questions here, and we'll be happy to address any of your questions. I just want to do one last question. I'm going to combine two questions. If you could just tell us, like, what would be the one pitfall that people should be aware of and look out for in completing the grant application or grant work? And what do you think is the one thing that everybody should know going into this if they were about to complete one of these proposals? Can I ask you first, Stu?
Well, let's see, I had a number of pitfalls. The one, I guess, I'm just going to reiterate the importance of following the instructions to a T. If you're not used to writing grants, or you're not used to writing, I think the chances are greater that you may overlook something. So I just want to reiterate what several of you have said. And it sounds like things are a lot easier than they used to be, that you can download this, sort of write your outline within the RFP. So that's about it. I think, like you said, Cassidy, if you miss something, you don't do it, they may throw it out, or they may just grade it down, and you may not pass muster, even for a very good project.
Yeah. And is that also the thing that everyone should know? The pitfall, follow the instructions, and don't overlook anything. Maggie, do you have something to add?
Yeah, we haven't talked about the budget part of the submission. And I would say do your best on that, but it's hard to imagine all the possibilities. But don't worry too much about the budget part, because at least in my case, it seems to me that SARE is more interested in the entire project. And if they've got questions about the budget, they'll come back and they'll ask you to maybe modify what you originally said, or they'll ask you questions to make the budget more precise and more careful. So I would say when you submit your project, work on the budget, but the budget, how accurate your budget is probably, they're going to be looking at your entire project, and they'll come back and they'll ask you more about the budget later.
Good to know.
So.
Mark's getting a call on his second phone. It's also, yeah, I know in my experience working with other USDA grants, sometimes if they have clarifications, they'll come back and allow you the opportunity to fix some of those things. So it's good to know that SARE does that also. Mark, sorry, Maggie, did you have something to add?
This is Jen. Yes, so that only applies to the budget. The budget is reviewed. So if there's questions about your grant, we can't come back to you and ask about that. The reviewers have to go by whatever it is that you've put on the page, just to make it fair to them. So we won't come back to you with questions about what's written, but the budget is checked by the people in accounting to make sure that the things that you're asking for are actually things that can be asked for. And so if questions do come up about your budget, then you can have the opportunity to change if something can't be funded, or if we don't understand the justification that you've given for it, how did you reach that figure? And the reviewers really like to see a practical budget. So they're farmers. The reviewers are about 30 farmers and ranchers from all 12 states in our region. So they're practical people, and they want to see that you did research on it, that you didn't just pull figures out of the air, that you checked whether it was online catalogs or whatever it was to try and find out what the actual pricing was.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point. Also, in the RFP and in the resources, there's a whole list of unallowable costs and things that you can double check if you're trying to charge something that SARE will not pay for. But it's great to know that they will also give you some feedback on that.
And you can always ask ahead of time too, if there's something you're not sure that we'll find, feel free to ask.
Yeah, Good to know. Mark, do you have something to add?
Yeah, and some of it goes along with the budget. First thing, the pitfall to know and understand is that the system that incorporates all the SARE proposals and grants is very different than any other system that you've probably worked with before, unless you've worked with a university and for that type of work already. Having said that, one of the things about the budget, when I was filling out my second year, I was entering real facts or real numbers that I actually spent, and that moved the budget over. Okay, so I guess one thing you need to know is you don't mess with the budget once it's there. You don't go and report, okay, I actually spent $2,000 more on equipment and $500 more on seed. Because with my project, I guess one of the things I didn't realize or didn't take into consideration was that if you've got a research plot and you're going to plant X amount of area in seed, it takes that much more to put in that seed or planter to get that planted. So you really need twice that much seed when you actually go and buy it. So you're buying a lot more seed. Anyway, so, just understand that the system that you are using to think through your project is very different than the system that they're using to capture that information. And the budget is the budget. When it starts, you don't change that later on without prior conversation with Joan or some other whoever is managing the project.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Once your award has been awarded, that's the money you get, and there's no more money to give out.
Yeah, that's not what I was trying to do. I wasn't trying to get more money. I was just trying to show, hey, I'm spending a lot more money than we originally allocated to show that this project means a lot to me. It's not just what SARE is putting into the project.
Yeah.
Right, and that actually, in the past, that was information we loved to get, but the rules changed, and that's unfortunately, so in what we can show on the budget is only what you've spent on the grant itself, because that's what our accounting people compare it to. But in the past, we used to be able to say, okay, the farmer spent this much themselves in addition to the grant. We can't do that anymore because a ruling came down that if we did that, we would have to come back to you and check that you spent that money. And we don't want to get involved with that. And we know you don't want to get involved with that. So although that's wonderful, valuable information, and you can write some of that into your report if you want to, that, you ended up spending this much more, because of course other farmers would love to have that information. But as far as the budgeting goes, we can't take that information because, then we would have to check up with you and make sure you actually made that match. So that's why we don't require matching funds, because we don't want to have to deal with that, and we know you don't want to either.
Yeah.
But very good point.
Yeah, that is a great point for also, just when you're doing your planning, being extra realistic about the money and the amount of supplies you're going to need, and that they will complete the project for you. Anne, you want to tell us a little bit about completing yours?
Sure. I guess the biggest thing I can say is make sure that you have a really clear goal that you're explaining really well to other people, because the people that are reviewing your grants are people that have no idea what your operation is. And a lot of the times we come across grants where we have to look up vocabulary that we're not familiar with that tailors to a specific type of farming. So just remember who your audience is when you're writing this grant. Follow all the directions, make sure you don't miss anything, double and triple check. And then a piece of advice that I would give is that once you receive, if you do receive your grant, you cannot keep enough records. So just remember that you're going to have to report 2 times at the end of your year. And if you have years like most farmers do, you get so busy in the middle of the year that you forget to write things down and keep track of it. So make sure you're either taking pictures with your cell phone so you can go back and track it at the end of the week, and so it's not so time consuming at the end of the year when you maybe don't remember everything.
That is an excellent point. Yes, you do have to write reports on your work. And I think one of the great things that our director here at the Land Connection does is, for all of our grants, we monthly will write down the tasks that we completed on that grant. So when it comes time to submit a quarterly report or end of year report, all of that information has been cataloged every month so that we know what's being done. So yeah, if you can implement some kind of system to keep yourself on track so you're ready for reporting, that is a great idea. Did you have something to add, Stu? You looked like you were eager to say something.
Who, me?
Oh yeah, no?
No, I was just leaning forward. I don't know why. Look at something.
Okay, well, I think we are just about at the end of our time here together. So I would just like to wrap up and say thank you so much to all of you, to Stu, Maggie, Ann, and Mark for joining us. And for Joan, I very much appreciate it. If any of you have any final thoughts you'd like to share, I would love to give you some space now. Or Joan, I don't know if you have any final words of wisdom or advice for folks that might be approaching this project.
All right. So I know that hearing about this is really good to hear from people who've actually been through it. And it does take time to prepare your ideas. But as Maggie pointed out, I know that can be really valuable, just helping you think through what it is that you want to do, whether you're funded or not. People have found that exercise to be really valuable. And we do understand that people writing these are not grant writers. We don't expect you to be grant writers. And so don't be intimidated by the process. If you've never applied for a grant before, this is a good one to start with, because it's not like going to grants.gov or something, which is a much more complicated process. So we hope you give it a try. And like Cassie pointed out, or I can't remember who pointed out, but we give you the review comments. We used to have to request them, but now that we have a more automated system, we provide review comments for everyone, whether you were funded or not. So those can be really helpful, and encourage you to look at that. And don't be discouraged if you don't get funded the first year, but we have had budget increases, amazingly enough, over the past few years. And so last year we were able to fund 55 of the grants, which is pretty amazing record. So it was almost 50% of the grants that we received were funded. So your chances in this are better than with many, many grant programs.
Excellent, thank you. All right, well, thank you all very much. I can tell Mark's getting out into the field, so I just want to thank you all for joining us and sharing your insight. I really appreciate it, and I wish you the best of luck in finishing out 2020 and all of your future farming endeavors. So have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Kathy.